Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 14th meeting of the Portsmouth School Board. Welcome. Hope everyone's enjoying Valentine's Day. Think of us all slaving here at the school board meeting while people are celebrating Valentine's Day. Okay, let's have the roll call.
Liz Barrett.
Here.
Pip Clues.
Here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Ann Walker.
Here.
Margot Peabody.
Here.
Nancy Clayberg.
Here.
Hope Van Epps. Brian French.
Here.
Carrie Nolte.
Here.
Danielle Miles.
Here.
Nick Dolan.
Here.
Shall we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We have some announcements and recognitions. Does anyone have any before I start? Okay, I would just like to call everyone's attention to our debate team at the Portsmouth High School. There are 4 members of our Portsmouth High School debate team have qualified for the 2023 National Public Forum Debate Tournament, which is in Louisville, Kentucky, on Memorial Day weekend. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So I unfortunately was not able to make it myself to the qualifier, but from what I've seen and also just knowing the people involved, it seems like it was a very, very tough fight, and they've done a ton of research leading up to this. Awesome. So I'm very impressed with all of them, and I think they deserve your recognition.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. Thanks. We also have 2 middle school students who are going to the Honor Band, which is the New Hampshire BDA. I'm not sure what Band Director Association or something. Anyway, okay, did I get that right? All right, 2 of our students from the middle school will be going there, and then we have 10 students from the middle school who will be going to the Southeast District Honor Choir. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah. So we're excited, and congratulations to them. And then the last thing I have is on Saturday, we had, I don't know how many students from Portsmouth High School that jumped into the ocean in the frigid waters of the Atlantic Ocean to benefit New Hampshire Special Olympics. And those students, I don't have the number. They raised almost $25,000 for New Hampshire Special Olympics. Awesome. Wonderful. Wow. And I must say, the next day, my son jumped into the frigid waters of the Atlantic Ocean for the 15th year in a row to benefit New Hampshire Special Olympics. So it was an exciting weekend, and fortunately, the weather was gorgeous. Yes. To do something like that. Well done. Okay. Does anyone else have anything? Zach, do you have anything? Or
I think I've kind of mentioned before, but it's important to I just want to continue to thank the people at Little Harbor for their flexibility as we have had to move classrooms and move offices and do a variety of different things around the pipes issue. The initial response of our teams was great, and but now, even as we've done that, we still had to go through a period of time where there's a lot of shuffling and things that needed to happen. We had principals working out of art rooms and all that type of stuff. So I don't want that. The fact that they're able to run reasonably seamless operations in the midst of all those things happening, that doesn't happen by mistake. That happens because a whole bunch of people come in on the weekends on their own time to make sure that we're up and running and operating without folks. There's no moaning and groaning about, well, I thought this was going to be my time with my family and I can't come in. Like, the job needs to get done. People come in, it gets done, we're up and running. And that has happened over and over again. So I just want to be I wanted to just thank the crew over at Little Harbor and the crew in maintenance and custodial once again for all their hard work.
Thank you. Thank you to all of them. Next item on the agenda is approval of 4 sets of minutes. So why don't we try to do these all in one motion, unless people feel that one item should be pulled out.
I've moved to approve the 4.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
We revise all the times that I was late on all 4 of the meetings. It was good perspective for me. Thank you, timekeepers. I will do better.
Is there any discussion on any of the PIP?
On the minutes from, I think, the only actual meeting that we had that wasn't just a work session, from the, let's see, the 24th.
January
January 24th.
Oh, January 24th.
There was a, let's see, I'm trying to find the section. Under old business, in our discussion of the communications plan, there was a motion that I made, which I think was then modified by a suggestion from Hope, and then restated by Margot. And then there was a lot of discussion about the timeline. And in the minutes, it says that there was never a vote taken on that motion. But my understanding was that it was all, and then there was another motion listed in the minutes. But my understanding was that all of that was one motion that I made, and then we added the deadline of when we wanted the information, and then we took the vote. So I don't know if others remember it that way, or if maybe my memory is off. But I was under the impression that was all one motion, and then we voted on it. Not that there were two separate
I
motions.
think I remember it that way.
Yep, that was my recollection as well.
Okay.
So then I would
And it was
suggest
in
that
March.
we just, I think,
We did set a deadline around it.
It's in there.
yeah, the deadline
Yeah,
is
the
in there.
March
I think
14th.
if we just removed the statement where it says vote never taken,
Okay. So we will
and-
take that out.
I will just say that my understanding was there was an intense amount of work done on that
that
section of
one
the
motion.
minutes.
Yeah.
And there was back and forth with the school attorney. There was rewatching multiple times, trying to figure out how to properly reflect that process. I think there was a lot of tumult in trying to create a record of what the kind of process was, and I think that was, and I think it's. And again, I didn't do it, but I think there's a spirit of what was trying to happen in the moment, and then there's what's a motion and what's not a motion, and when is it kind of an amendment to somebody's motion. And so my understanding is there was a decent, I just wanted to, Paulette does a lot of hard work, and I think there was an intense amount of work trying to reflect accurately what occurred in the moment through multiple watchings of what occurred, and
She
through-
does an awesome job,
Yeah.
and we did move
Yeah.
quickly.
yeah, she does. And I remember there was quite a bit of discussion about it.
Yeah.
But I think the intention was that discussion of the deadline was part of the whole motion.
Okay. So does everyone agree with that? Is there any?
What meeting was this?
January 24th.
24th.
Does everyone agree with that change that Pip wants to make? Okay.
I think it's covered though in the second part as I'm looking at it.
Yeah. I think it is too.
So in
because
that-
it repeats
Covered.
the motion above it, and then it says. vote
I guess I
approve.
would just worry about if Paulette put that, because under Margot's motion, it says bring it back and move it forward. Motion on the floor that the template. So I think, to me, this is accurate, and I guess I would worry if Paulette went back and forth with the attorneys.
Okay, well, it
To
looks
change
to me
it.
like there were two separate motions. One that was never voted on, and then one that was. So, but what you're saying is it looks like it's the same, that,
Or
So-
I guess maybe, is there a point, sorry to interrupt.
no, it's all right. It's not clear who made that motion, but I guess it was Margot restating the previous motion that had been discussed.
That's how I look at it. That's how I'm looking at it. It was restated, but in the deadline was added.
So I guess my question is then why does it say vote never taken when we did,
Yeah,
in
I-
fact, take a vote? If it is the same, all of the same motion, then
Right.
why does it?
So that's why I think we should take that out. Vote never taken should come out. Do you agree with that, Pip? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just
Does
delete
everyone else
that.
agree with that?
So I'll say in just defense of the person I rely on most in the school district, I think the spirit. I totally agree with what the spirit of what you're saying in terms of where the conclusion that we drew was, and I'll just say I think I haven't gone back and looked at it exactly to kind of go through all the kind of machinations of what happened. But I just wanted to say I think she did work really, really hard and go through multiple go-rounds to try to get this accurate to what occurred. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Liz?
So I guess my interpretation of that would be that the minutes are the minutes are the minutes, and if we want that included into something, take a vote on it right now or vote tonight or have it being a separate line in a agenda versus this. So however you want to pull it together, so to sort of add an amendment tonight to that.
I don't think
Right.
that's necessary because the second motion that's in there that did get a vote basically says what the first motion that says vote not taken says. So I think we can leave it the way it is if everybody agrees and move forward. Yes.
I would just add that going forward, I think what would help Paulette is when we make motions, we need to write them down, pass them forward, and restate the same motion that was written. I think that was what was happening there, but nothing was written down, so anyway. We'll just practice the art of writing our motions.
Okay, Lisa?
In the spirit of that, I brought this up before, but the city council does put their motions where feasible in the packet in advance in writing so that everybody's on the same page.
But I think
And
with this, we didn't.
No, I know
we
in this
didn't.
I know in this case that was a particular situation, but I just think we might wish to revisit that in the future.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, is everyone in agreement? Can we approve these 4 sets of minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our public comment session. Do we have a motion to go into public comment?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have one gentleman here to speak at public comment, David Hudson. David, you have 3 minutes to speak before the school board. If you could give us your name and address, that would be wonderful.
Sure.
Thank
My
you.
name's David Hudson. I live at 384 Lang Road in Portsmouth.
Go ahead.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Sorry, my mistake. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. So I have an adopted child, 3.5 years old. He's registered in the preschool program. I will say that you guys have some wonderful therapists in that program. And I just wanted to, number one, say that to start off with. He has a rare neurogenetic disorder called MECP2 duplication syndrome. And that syndrome has several issues associated with it or symptoms associated with it: developmental delays, hypotonia, gross and fine motor skills challenges. One of them also is a compromised immune system. And I've been working with Zach, thank you very much for all the help that you've given me, to try and find a solution to have my child actually in a classroom. So we started with extended school year services in June of 2022. We made the school aware of the symptoms that were associated with this. We offered and sat down, and I won't name names, with the administration and said that we would actually purchase, and I just want to bring that up based on today's conversation, that we would actually purchase an active purification system. We were told at that particular time that there was a lot of money spent on HEPA filtration, on updating HVAC systems, and so we took a wait and see perspective, and it didn't work out. I will say that much. We moved at one point, to one-on-one therapies instead of our son being in a classroom. I'd love to see him in a classroom. I think we're almost there again, which is great. I'm concerned, though, that he's missed 95% of school. I think the school district has a perspective on that. I have a different perspective on why that is. I won't go into that. He's missed 25% of his therapies as well, and that's really impactful for somebody who has MECP2, right? Especially with the gross motor skills and fine motor skills challenges that they have. So they regress pretty quickly. We also made the school district aware at the original time, and we made them re-aware in a meeting that we had in the superintendent's office, that pulmonary infections and viruses are the #1 killer for these kids, and they don't live past 25. 50% of them don't live past the age of 25. I am asking this board to help me help you to find a long-term solution. So I'm working with the school district right now to actually find a short-term solution that mitigates the risk in both his classroom and in the therapy room that he actually works in. I need a long-term solution. My wife's name is Jennifer Friel. We have a long history in Durham. We also have a long history with her father, actually, who has passed, but is a legend over at UNH in terms of basketball coach. We're not going anywhere, right? We're planning on living our life out here. And so I'm looking for some help from you guys to find a long-term solution so my son can attend school. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you coming in. Okay. Next on the agenda, we're going to, I'm sorry.
Any online
Oh, are there any online public comment? No. Do we have a motion to close the public comment session?
So moved?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Marco. Next, we go to, I'm going to ask for a motion to go down to consideration and approval of the proposed FY24 budget. We're just going to move that up to the agenda at this point. Do we have a motion to do that?
Are we moving up or moving the public hearing after?
We're going to move the public hearing after we have this presentation.
What we had discussed is what we were concerned about is having the public hearing in advance of
Right.
the opportunity for the public to actually hear the presentation. So I think the thought process was if we can slide up the portion of what the board would hear, the meat of that, and then on the tail end of that, have the opportunity to then open the public hearing. At that point, have the opportunity for the public to engage with all the information that the board has heard up to that point. And then if there, then if there was or wasn't, if there was the possibility of a vote tonight, then it would be appropriate to vote. But we didn't want to flip the public hearing and then have people have the opportunity to speak, then give new information. That was the concern. So.
Nancy, I have a question.
Yes.
We had mentioned previously about being able to respond to public comment afterwards. And I guess the only thing I, more of a parliamentary question would be whether there's a mechanism for a parent who would want to come to speak to the school board privately about a situation. I mean, obviously, we just heard a gentleman essentially offer a donation to the school to upgrade a system. And so I guess I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism to have that contact.
We don't respond to public comment. That's the modus operandi that we have. We don't respond to public comment.
I know we had talked about briefly at one point, but I guess that's
well, maybe
the only
we could do that at a future.
question that I
put
would
it
have
on
right
it as a
now.
future agenda item, but we do not respond to public comment. Yes, Margot.
I'd like to make a motion to move the consideration and approval of the proposed FY24 budget section under old business of tonight's agenda to now.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I'll write
Okay.
that down.
Okay, Zach, we'll hand it over to you.
So, and I'm going to very quickly hand it over to Nathan. Our goal is to walk you back through what's kind of using the core of what we talked to you about in the last budget session. Update those numbers based on what we felt was a clear consensus, at least that evening in the room, about where people felt most comfortable. Give you updated numbers. A couple things that have also changed in terms of what we've received from the city side of the equation around. A couple of things have adjusted a little bit and put you in a position to give you that most up-to-date information. So I'll hand it over to Nathan.
And I'll ask Mr. Tovey if he could kick the slide up for me. And then remind you that everything that was just discussed really leads us back to, it was in the packet. The slideshow is really not so much informational for you as it is informational for the public. Wanted to make sure the public had that in the packet so that they had the opportunity to understand what you were deliberating on. It's a summation of what we did at our last meeting. So, Matt, if you give me the next slide, let me just talk for a couple of minutes and then take any questions you have before we open the public hearing. Wanted to remind the public about the process we've been through, and again, more for the public's consumption than for yours. The superintendent's office offered guidance out to the school budget makers. That includes directors of departments as well as building principals. Those folks worked to draft their proposals and brought them into the central office team one by one in 30, 45, 60 plus minute meetings. We reviewed all of their ideas and the details of their discretionary budgets, line by line. We then compiled a continuing services budget, which we brought to the board so you'd have a sense out of the gate to continue level services, what we have now, the people we have, the programs we run, with collective bargaining increases and the like. What does that look like for another year? And then considered all of the feedback from the budget makers and brought a proposed budget, which in this case was different from the continuing services. You started with public hearing and began your deliberation in a series of workshops, and ultimately, we seek the board's approval on the proposed budget, and we'll then send that forward to the city manager and the finance office, the finance department, and the city manager will compile that with police and fire and general government, and will propose a full city budget to the city council. That will come out in that very well done, full-color glossy book that you'll see, and it will be online in a very interactive PDF version. And then the city council in May will hold a series of hearings and workshops, and will finalize the budget. That process normally ends by the first or second week of June. So that's just how we kind of get here and where we're headed. So if Matt will give me the next slide, let me walk you through the numbers. Remind everybody that the continuing services budget, which is really an exercise to give a sense of if we don't make changes, where do we land? The continuing services budget included a health insurance increase, where our health insurance climbs by a percentage that's dictated by the 10-year rolling average of our health rates. And we make our contribution to a health stabilization fund, and out of that, our bills are paid. So that was a 5.3% increase. It's about $450,000. We did salary and wage adjustments to reflect everybody that was here and what their collective bargaining agreements from the union contracts, what they provided for them. We saw a savings because New Hampshire retirement's rates fell. We made a correction to a couple of English language arts teachers at the high school whose FTEs had shown in the budget at 75%, but they were really 83%. The money matched the 83%, but the FTEs had never been adjusted. So to make our documents make more sense, we added that no-cost 0.16. And then we had an elementary special ed case manager that had been added to the fold coming out of the last cycle because of the needs that we had in special ed at the elementary level. And then we have bus contracts that grew our costs. We've talked in the past about our energy increases, electricity rising 66% on the supply side and gas rising 41%. That cost us a little over $250,000 of new cost in this budget. And then special ed out of district placement costs and services. The reality is they're suffering. Service providers, the placements that we use, suffering some of the same challenges we are with staffing and the costs of human capital, and those costs being passed on to us. All in, that's a 4.1% increase. It added that 1.16 FTEs. The actual dollar amount of the budget may be irrelevant right now, but we went through that exercise first. In the next slide, Matt, please, thank you, sir. The proposed changes now include, and only if you've been here or watched the tape, option 3B, 3.5, the middle ground. I've incorporated all of that and can say this then about the proposed budget as it stands in the aggregate. We had a small increase in extended school year. That's the identified students in the special ed realm continuing their programming through the summertime. The extended school year and some adaptive services costs. We've added a couple of extracurricular stipends. There's one there for the National Technical Honor Society and our CTE program, and the bass fishing sport, which is NHIAA approved, and we had missed that in our budget process. I had missed that. Thank you. We had a vacant half-time position at the central office that we reduced. We made a reduction in a teaching position at Little Harbor, and then we've shifted 4 FTEs out of ESSER. We were funding there a counselor at the middle school and a math tutor at the middle school, a social worker who has done a lot of work at the middle school, but has also reached out and done supportive work both up and down the grade levels, and an interventionist in math at the high school. Those 4 positions are here. And then the other piece that you hadn't heard all of what we just talked about brought us to, I think, a number that looked like 4.88% when we were talking a week ago. The city passed me an adjustment to our workers' comp projection. The city's a little bit behind us, and so as general government started to work on the bills and the projections, we actually get our workers' comp from them, and when they handed me our share of next year, it was $14,857 higher than what I had plugged in, and I think that's we can talk about that another time. There's definitely some consumption utilization costs that have driven because of some of the slips and falls and other things that have befallen our staff. But I also think that a fair chunk of that was just premium rate hikes, where the workers' comp pool is suffering some of the same challenges we are everywhere. So I adjusted for that. And then all of the district operating challenges that we tried to address with cost inflations added up to about $60,000, which was really not a huge increase when you consider that the last couple of cycles we've cut hundreds of thousands out of the stuff that we use in our buildings. So we put back about 60 of it. All of that leads us, Matt, if you want to hit the next screen, all of that leads us to a summary, a proposed budget right now that felt like we were getting there when we were meeting last time. It's $60,869,335. That's the general fund budget. It represents an increase of $2.8 million. I broke down the salaries, benefits, and operating costs, and we were in the continuing services. We'd identified 1.16 of increase. We had a reduction of 1.5 positions, and then an increase again of the shift from ESSER of 4 positions. So we have a net FTE increase of 3.66, 3 2/3. And all in, it is a 4.9% projected increase over the prior year, fiscal 23. So, again, more for the consumption of folks at home. In your packet, I would remind you that the pink sheet, this time, the very pink sheet, so to make sure that folks can see that from space, the pink sheet and then the summary that follows. I wanted you to have those to be able to put all of these in your board binder, your budget binder, for posterity, if not for reference. That's what those are, and they all support and defend the same numbers, or explain the same numbers that I just kind of went through in the comments. But, and that's it. You know, I think Matt, you can, the last slide, just ask if there are questions. That's just formality, but I would ask if you folks have any questions before. And you don't have to make this decision in this moment. The idea is if you have any questions, we could follow up on those, and then we'd open up the public hearing again, collect any feedback from your public, and then you can decide what you want to do next with your budget.
Thank you, Nathan. Do we have any questions for Nathan? Hands out. No questions? Okay.
It is where you were last week. So, I mean, I said I would clean it up for you, and that's what we've done.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess we can go to the cost center summary. You already did that, and you did the summary spreadsheet. You did the 3 items on
Each
the
of
agenda,
those.
correct?
All of those,
Okay.
yeah, those are the
summary
3 that were in the
spreadsheet.
packet.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so we're all set. All right.
Your homework is to get those in your binder. That's
Right.
it.
Okay, so we will reopen the public comment regarding the budget. Reopen the public hearing on FY24 budget. To do that? We don't? Okay. Is there anybody that would like to speak on the FY24 school budget? Do we have anyone online that would like to speak about the FY24 school budget? No? Okay. Thank you very much. I guess the next item is a motion to approve the budget.
So why don't you close your public hearing
Okay, we will close the public hearing.
formally, and then let me just say before you take a vote, again, I remind you of the process. This is the school board's adopted vision, and it will be forwarded to the city manager's office, and it will be added to a final city budget proposal that will be before the city council somewhere in writing end of April, 1st of May. I believe right now the hearings that we anticipate participating in are in the teens of May, in the 12 to 17 of May timeframe.
When's our all-day marathon?
I think Monday the 15th
Monday the
is
15th.
is our all-day, which each department is expected right now. This is something harkens of days of old, I guess, where they used to do long Saturdays. Is that what you said, Nancy? They used to
Yes,
do budget day on
all day
Saturday.
Saturday.
Now they're talking, the council's wanting to do that on Monday, and I'm pretty sure it's Monday, May 15th. Each department will come and have its time in front of the public and the board, the council. But there are some other hearings in that process as well. All of that is encapsulated and listed on the city's website. You can follow the click to the city finance office, and you can find the timelines. And we will certainly continue to remind you about the city's process. So just wanted, people might be watching this later, make sure they catch that. So back to you, sorry.
Okay, so the motion would be that the school board approves the FY '24 budget of $60,869,335.
Correct.
Which reflects a 4.90% increase over last year, and an increase of 3.66 FTEs, and an increase of $2,843,877. Okay, does everybody have that on the sheet here? So you know what I'm talking about, because I kind of screwed that up. Okay, do we have a motion?
Nancy?
So moved.
Second? We have a
Said the
second.
percentage incorrectly.
4.90%?
You said 09.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, 4.90% increase. Thank you,
To be.
Lisa. Okay, Brian did it first. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Ann? All in favor? Oh, do we have any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very
We
much.
have our FY '24 budget, reflecting a 4.90% increase. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, we will move back up to the agenda, where we have a presentation of social media data, and that is Zach.
So this is not meant to be, we were talking about presentations the other day and about whether or not what we want to do with presentations kind of period, and whether or not cycling back through principles was the appropriate way to go. And one of the things I had offered is that in my previous district, we used to alternate between program presentations and giving the board presentations that would give additional information that would reveal kind of what's happening in the school district a little bit. And one of the ways in which we did that was we identified certain data points. And that might be something like looking at spending a night, taking 15 minutes to look at free and reduced lunch populations inside the school district. Who are those? How many students are there? What is that statistic? How do you come to it? What does it look like compared to communities surrounding us? What are the impact on programming? And we'd spend they would be quick hitter, informational opportunities for the board. So, and that would just be one example. So tonight, I just wanted to come back to, as a starter for that, come back to some of the data I had left as a hand carry one meeting, and added a few other pieces, just to look very briefly at some of our social media information as a district. And so I'll take you through that, and I'll have Matt share the slides. There's a couple of additional pieces from what we shared in the packet that are on there. And it's not meant to be a super long conversation. A lot of this stuff will come out as we get into the March 14th meeting. As we move into the communication plan and we start doing that work, a lot of this stuff will continue to come back to. But I wanted to at least give you a snapshot. So, Matt, give me the next slide. So some of this stuff you already have in your packet. Actually, let me get myself. This was pretty recent information on looking at who our Facebook and Instagram, the number of followers we have on Facebook and Instagram at the moment. And let me just open up my slide deck here. My apologies. So at the moment, we're having 1,300 followers. is not a huge group of folks to follow a district of this size. I mean, it's nice to have people who are checking, who have decided they're going to go ahead and follow our site. But the other thing that's interesting is, just really quickly, some of the things you can see is that we don't have a lot of people who are exclusive Instagram folk. We have a lot of exclusive Facebook folk. So, for reasons that, I don't fully haven't diagnosed yet, we do have a following on Facebook, but not so much on Instagram. Matt, if you can move ahead. And then as you get into this, I think I'll hopefully Margot looked at this information the other night and I think said, oh, we've got moms is what we've got. And, I think that this particular kind of breakout, when you start getting into the gender, you take that group of people and you start looking at, okay, amongst those 1,300 unique users, what are we looking at? And what we're looking at is primarily, females between the ages of 35 and 54 is who is looking at our social media in at least these two platforms. That's who our audience is. If you can move ahead, Matt. This is a slide that I don't have, and I apologize that it's a little bit distant, and I know we talked about this the other night, and I apologize I don't have a printed version. This is from some of our YouTube analytics. So this is one of the last YouTube videos I had done around it was around Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And it gives us, again, another snapshot of like how many people are actually viewing the material. So, in this particular, this is not the highest watched one of all time. It goes up and down depending on what catches. I'll talk about how this works, but this is 212 views from folks. You get the number of watch time and the number of subscribers that we picked up as a result. Matt, if you go ahead one more.
That's a quick question about that slide.
Yeah.
Can it tell how many people actually viewed the message as well?
You can actually get into.
Or read it, or I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't think I'll go through in a second. I don't think I clipped that particular. You can see what you can see is on average. So of the 212 people, you also can get a line graph where it's like here at 212 people clicked it and opened it and started watching. How many people dropped off 5 seconds in? How many people dropped off 30 seconds in? You can see where it tails off. And what's, what the thing, this should not be surprising to any of us. You hold people, you got people for 30 seconds if you're lucky. And then some will hold on, but you lose a third of your people drop off 20, 30 seconds in. And so you got to make sure those first 20, 30 seconds are going to hold people's attention. And there's this balance of trying to use that platform to give out information, and how much you can do in 30 seconds, versus how many people you want to click your stuff. And
This is on the Parent Square platform?
So this is the other thing, and I'll come to this in a minute too, which is really interesting, which is when, although not consistently, but pretty consistently, when I've created those videos, it's going out in a couple different ways. It lives in YouTube. That's where it's being created. So
what is this from, YouTube?
So this is YouTube analytics right here.
Okay.
It lives in YouTube initially. It's then being... I'll go really quickly through the process. So I create something in YouTube. It then, I create something. I edit it I edit it on my desktop. Then I send it out to this company called Rev.com, who does all the captioning. So we do the captioning stuff because we're trying to make sure that we're ADA compliant, we're equitable in the way in which we're thinking about our audience, and all that type of good stuff. And then, so I've got the captioning, which is not the auto captioning done by YouTube, which is not as good, but we're paying people to actually do the captioning. Okay. And then also the same group does the transcript with all my ums and ahs and whatever. It's just like, here's what it is that gets pasted into the Parent Square stuff. So when that's done, it gets burned back up into YouTube. Then I go to Parent Square. Then I paste it into Parent Square. Then I put the link in with the video image there, so it's more people are more likely to click on it. Then paste in the transcript with the information about captioning and how the captioning works. So there's a little bit of a process to kind of get it all up there and flowing. But anyways, this part is from the actually native YouTube stuff.
So can you see who clicks the
Liz,
link in
let's
Parent
have the
Square though to
questions.
see how people read it?
So this is good. So what you can see.
Questions later, please.
So we can, well, I can, and I'll go with something about how do people get here, because the other thing I was going to say is, so this gets posted in Parent Square, then usually, in most cases, I think this is one time where I haven't, that I'm also pasting it to the same video to the district's Facebook page at the same time. So it's going out to multiple channels simultaneously, and this helps to see like who's getting to it from where. So if you go ahead, Matt, again, so this helps to answer some of your question, Liz, is that it's not exactly what your question is, but in terms of how are people getting to the video, 84% of the people are Parent Square, and are adults in Parent Square, because you got the students are in my Student Square. So the vast majority of people are getting it through Parent Square still, not through Facebook, where it's only 4.5%. YouTube, I've been picking up a few followers along the way. So my loyal, whatever it is, 16 to 20 whatever people who get the stuff when it gets posted via YouTube. That's a small group in terms of this particular video. That's where they came in from, as opposed to coming in through these other places first. But it gives you an idea that Parent Square is a good, in terms of the video stuff, Parent Square is a good driver of people to the content. Matt, go ahead. Couple quick ones here, and these are small, and I apologize. I'll just the upper one is it's 98. It's basically like 98% to 2%. It's how many of these are from people who are subscribed to your channel. So the vast majority of people are non-subscribed people to the YouTube channel. How many people are utilizing? Next one is on subtitles. How many people are utilizing subtitles or not utilizing subtitles? So you get 95% of people not utilizing subtitles, but there are 5% who are. So there is an audience who wants the subtitle utilization. This is, again, small, and I can send out print copies to the board for these couple of slides that were extra. This is the bottom is a timeline. At the bottom, it's got a timeline of dates. The spike is when the video went out. And there's two different things. The purple line is returning viewers, people who have viewed before, and the blue is new viewership. So you also get to see like, okay, so who's taking a peek? How often are we bringing in new people? What is it? Also, as you look at each set of posts, you get to see what is bringing in new people, and what is just hitting the same folks. So Matt, if you had, so there's a lot more you can get into in terms of what's going on inside of these different platforms, and I would just say that in a smaller district, we were, we had, instead of 1,300 followers, we had 2,500 followers on our site, and we didn't have, when I entered the superintendency, we didn't have a Facebook page. So we had to kind of build it from the ground up. And if you move ahead, Matt, it would be helpful. Thank you. One of the things we did, and it was, as we were having some success with it, we also got it became uncomfortable at one point, is not only were we developing content and then just putting it out there for folks, but we were using paid targeted ads for particular groups of people in order to build our followership. So when I say that, I know that the people that we have, the moms, were going to get on, and they were going to see what was happening. And particularly that was going to be true if we were generating content of their kids doing things on a regular basis. And that was going to be true. But there were a whole bunch of other people that we also wanted to have an idea of what the day-to-day life in the school district was. because one of the things we found and we thought was really problematic was everybody went to school and everybody pretty much thinks school is exactly what it was when they were in school, which is not the case. And so how do we kind of open the window a little bit for people to see what does school look like now? And what are all the amazing things that are going on in schools? Because we've been in an environment for we're on 2 decades now, where it's all test scores, schools are failing, what are schools not doing for you? That's been the kind of political, social environment cultural environment in which we've been in. So how do we open up the window so people have an opportunity to see that stuff? So one of the things we would do in terms of paid targeted ads is we would, if we had something on, let's say students were doing an engineering project in the 5th grade, we would target in the community through Facebook, give me people within a 10-mile radius of this particular zip code who are interested in schools or engineering or like whatever, and we would send that out so it would come into their feeds. And it wasn't super expensive, but it might run us on a particular, depending on how big an audience we were trying to target and how many days we were trying to do it. Generally, we always ran at least a 3-day ad when we were doing it. It could be anywhere from $25 to $100 to run a particular thing, but it would get it out to a particular audience. And what we would see is things could catch fire because those people in turn could then share out to other folks and see, are you seeing this cool thing that's happening inside of this place? And it could be people who don't have kids in the school district. It could be people who are in the business community. A lot of cases, it got into alumni started to become a bigger factor in what was happening in terms of our social media presence, and then just broader, even within the state. People started to kind of push out, and then sometimes, depending on the issue, we might even target particular parts of the state, not around our zip code, to see where we thought people might have an interest. In addition to the paid work, we also did a lot of work around kind of unifying our messaging and having a coordinated approach, that it wasn't balkanized. It wasn't a bunch of individual people all off on their own doing their own thing. We had an overall kind of thought process about what we were trying to put forward to the community, how we designed our posts, what types of, how we always wanted an image. We had conversations and trainings around what types of images we wanted to have in our posts, and then what type of language and how much language was too much language. And so we worked through all those types of things, and then we tried to try to work on a cadence to our messaging. So there was a certain frequency people could count on when things were going to come out from which platforms, when, and we were. Our public became very much understood what platforms we were using for what, and that didn't change as you moved across schools. It didn't flip, like it was consistent. You knew what Twitter was going to be used for at schools, and if you moved from one school to the next, it didn't change on you. Like Twitter was a consistent thing. You knew what it was for. You knew what was going to be there. If it was Instagram, you knew what Instagram was going to be used for, what it wasn't going to be used for. And as a parent, and what was great about that is, as a parent, you didn't have to get retrained. You already knew. You knew what the deal was. You knew how this stuff worked. So, so we really focused on that, not having to retrain our stakeholders. Matt, what was ahead? So how do we do that? We were very specific about, we went from a period of time where the district had kind of who kind of feels like doing some content creation, you're it. And instead we identified content creators, we paid content creators. These are in-house people who are doing other work anyways. We trained those folks, we paid them, we monitored the work on a regular basis. We talked all the time, constantly. What we were saying is we are working on telling a story to our public about who we are, what we are, adding to kids' lives and what we are collectively adding to, in our case, the community of Springfield as a whole. And we are constantly reminding stakeholders. We're trying to push back on the fact that it's like school. Yes, it is important what standardized test scores say. Also, there's amazing things beyond those numbers that are happening within schools on a regular basis that are super important to kids, families, and communities. The way in which we ended up doing a lot of this stuff, because we tried to do it independently with just coordinating meetings with folks, was eventually we landed on this tool called Buffer. Matt, if you can slide me ahead. Buffer is, this is not the best, it's hard to really show you graphically. This is one example, it doesn't really help you very much. Basically, Buffer allows you to take all your different social media platforms, integrate them under one kind of umbrella, and coordinate it all within Buffer as that umbrella. And so what you can do is you can schedule, and this is one of the cooler features. There's a lot of nice parts to this and great analytics built into it. But what it allowed us to do as teams is if Patty was working at Little Harbor and Patty was my content creator, I could give her access to the Twitter at Little Harbor, the district Facebook page, the Instagram at Little Harbor, but she wouldn't have access to the other buildings, but she could see what the other buildings are doing. And if Brian was working at Dondero, same thing at Dondero, and then what we could do is all these folks could collaborate through the platform to make sure we weren't doubling up on times. When are things going out? You're not getting two messages at the same time. There's a pace to it, there's a consistency, and we're always targeting 2 times a day. We would avoid the weekends. Research says the weekends are not as good a time. So we were Monday through Friday primarily. We were looking at a 9 o'clock release and a 12 o'clock release. And it would be pretty regimented. And those were slots that were available to content creators, and they knew they had to have at least one piece of content on a weekly basis that was going to go up. And they had to stand in line with other people in order to have it all set. Matt, if you go ahead. Not a great slide. I'll just tell you, again, I'll just say there's a lot of really good in-depth analytics available through the platform. And instead of having to mine it through all the different social media platforms, Buffer would allow you to do it all through one place. Keep going, Matt. I'm going to whip through this, and then I can provide in the future this to the board in a paper form. We've got a spreadsheet of this that we developed as a leadership team, just to kind of do an inventory of what we're looking at. And we went through and we identified, in the district, what are the platforms, the name of the pages, the where do you find them, who manages the pages, what's the frequency, what is pre-screened if it's connected with a building by a principal and what is not. And we went through and kind of did an inventory of all this stuff. We'll go really quickly through these slides. You have them in your packet. These are the couple. I did include Parent Square. You could argue Parent Square is not really a social media thing. It's different. But we included Parent Square just for the purposes of thinking about that as we'll call it a cousin of social media. And if you could push Matt to the next one. So by the time you get to Dondero, you're into six different ways in which we're trying to communicate with folks. All of which I think are filtering through the principal at some point for some type of, okay. But that's a lot of different channels for people to try to monitor and be on top of. Keep going, Matt. So Fort, New Franklin, again, we got some Twitter, and some of these are ones that kind of sort of used to have a life, but have kind of tailed off over time, and have not been officially declared dead yet, but are on life support. If you can move ahead. Portsmouth Middle has got the 2 channels. I know you guys have talked a lot about what you like about communication, and that hasn't necessarily been explicitly mentioned before. But it's just the 2 channels, just Parent Square and whatnot. Yeah, Portsmouth High School and the CTE. So you've got a variety of different things there as well. And then Matt, you can move ahead one more. And this is not the best stuff, but I will tell you that, and the communications committee's talked about this and the work they've done. one of the challenges around Parent Square is based on the fact it does not have the same robust analytical ability that some of the other platforms I was showing you have. It does not give you the same ability to know in detail who's clicking what when, and so that is a challenge. As I said before, our goal for the remainder of the year is try to maximize Parent Square to see what we can squeeze out of it, and then make judgments coming out of the end of that maximization. So, anyways, it's a whole bunch of stuff to be thrown at you, but I'm happy to take any quick questions. It's more about just giving you a peek behind the curtain than it is to talk about any specific strategies other than the couple I mentioned.
Do we have any questions? Thank you, Zach.
You're welcome.
Do we have any questions for Zach? Lisa?
Well, first of all, not a question, but this is really helpful to see as an overview. And I think the more you dig into it, and this may be in your admin spreadsheet already, but there are just like dozens of different accounts all over the place. Like if you have a kid in band, there's a special Portsmouth band Facebook page that you have to follow if you want to know, like at the last minute when things are happening. There's a bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really helpful to know that you're starting to get your arms around that so that it's easier for people to find. The one thing that I am curious about is what you're thinking about at this stage in terms of trying to get more crosstalk between some of these different things that are happening, because you can't shut them down overnight. Like there's a lot of membership and devotion to some of these channels. Like I'm biased. I ran the Little Harbor PTA, Facebook page and website, which is not in there. Thank you very much. But no, but I mean, people are really used to going to certain places for certain things, and if you're trying to unify it as a district, like is that something?
So this is a challenge, right? So when you're in a period. When you've gone through a period where it's just kind of like, I can see internally outside of the PTA situation, but even in the internal stuff where there are these specific to certain niche kind of areas where it's like, hey boss, I think I might create a Facebook page for people to follow so they can have a better idea what's going on. Well, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was like, that sounds like a neat, innovative way to keep people in the flow of information. That's cool. And I think what will be challenging, I'm glad you said, because I was going to say, whatever your question is going to be, my next thing was going to be, the challenge is going to be, there's a cultural component to this, that people have already established their culture around their channels that they like. And so, and I know this is what I talk to administrators about, anything when we talk about the need to unify some of our practice. Everybody's on board with unification of practice, whether it's around curriculum, communication, all that other stuff, as long as unification means the other guy is going to change what they're doing to do what I'm doing, right? And the challenge is going to be in some of that unification, there is some guardrailing around some of the unlimited freedom that was available before to do it the way you want, however you want, whenever you want, and so that will be a challenge. And it's not just because of the nature of kind of here, which is great. There are groups who are not PTA, PTO, but also there's other groups who are kind of like, we'll call it lightly affiliated with schools. They're not my employees. So, but they're also filling up the bandwidth that our stakeholders have to absorb information about us at the same time. And they may or may not be information that we're screening in any form. And so that is going to be a challenge. And I don't have an immediate answer for you other than, my goal is to sit down with all those different folks and start having this dialogue about like, how are we being more thoughtful about what we're putting out, not because people are doing a bad job, but because the people who are receiving this from us have limited bandwidth to receive it. And so, if it's a finite resource, then we have to start making a different set of choices about how we deliver content to people.
Yeah, so there's two things I would say, like, people have had really positive feedback that I've heard from a lot of places around the district about the ability of Parent Square posts to go out on social media, because that wasn't always the case. So it is much easier for those videos to get out there into the world so that extra people can see them, and I think that has helped people who don't always notice Parent Square to be like, oh, there's a video, you know, and they should know it's in Parent Square. And the other thing I do think that people are wanting to try to preserve that's not in Parent Square is the ability to have some of those connections.
Yeah.
You know, like just one example that I thought was so touching is like New Franklin does this great project, you know, around Kindness Day. And then Don Darrow posts to be like, oh, look, this is so cool. Look what New Franklin did for us. And I think having that organic community connection that does happen between all those groups is not preserved in Parent Square in a great way.
Right.
And that's just one thing where I think it would be cool to figure out how to do that.
And I think for me, the one of connected with that, and I think there's a conversation to be had with the city, is when I look at powerful solutions, the trend right now in terms of the stuff I think that works really well is that you have seamlessly integrated website / social media stuff where it's not like they're not add-ons. Those things are like totally integrated. They're not, you're buying a secondary product. You have one product and it all works together seamlessly. And at the same time, I'm very conscious of trying to make sure that we figure out how that would work or not work with the city and what we're doing with the city at the same time. So I think I've said before in writing someplace that my goal this year is maximize what we're doing on, squeeze everything we can squeeze out of Parent Square, squeeze everything we can fix whatever we can fix on the website around what's there in an existing way, and then come to conclusions based on, okay, this is maximization. So is this good enough? Or do we do, because those transitions to new platforms, to move to a more seamless solution, those require a lot of training, a lot of movement of content. Sometimes companies can help us do that, so we don't have to do it all on our own. But it's a lot of work and/or a lot of cash on the front side to maybe do it.
I think Danielle has a question. Thank you, Lisa.
I just had a quick thought on that, and I was reflecting on the systems piece of it and thinking about PHS Clippers it's the basketball team, Instagram has an amazing group of parents who are essentially running it. And it's phenomenal, and I started taking photographs, and so I started working with this mom who was looking for photographs, putting together these advertisements in a very professional way to notify our student body that there were upcoming games, and it has worked phenomenally. Awesome. But it looks at, I guess I bring it up because it's, how do we solidify this into a more sustainable system, right? This just happened to work out that there's this mom with this talent, I have a camera, I'm there now because I have these children. And then actually the yearbook ended up grabbing this folder that I was just sharing out to the students, but it was this weird, like, I'm putting my mom hat on, taking pictures of kids because I'm a mom, but do I have permission as a teacher to share it across? It just felt a little funky, but what works is that it's getting the message out to the kids on their platforms, that it's across Insta, and then the other kids were taking it and throwing it out and putting it on Snapchat and all of these other things. But what part do you allow the cultural wave to just take it and let non-district-y people take this on versus how can we tag on and say, this is really working, what can we get in place so that this stays, so that when these kids graduate out and this set of parents go, that we can sustain that same success.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a bunch of layers to that. Like, so when it comes to our stuff, if we're going to put something out on any platform, people have the ability to say, I don't want to media release I don't want my kid's image out there, right? So for us, we have to go through a process to make sure. And we used to do this where we would go through, and usually it's a limited number of students, but we would have like, it's the best shot of all time, and it's like, Jamie Johnson's in it. It's out. We can't use it. Can't use Jamie Johnson stuff. So we'll use a lesser image. But if we have a third party that's not the school district, but you get, it's PHS Clippers. So it sounds like us, right? I mean, so, and now we're pushing out images.
And they've got 300 to 400 followers just for the boys basketball team.
Right.
And so looking at what is it that's successful about it, we've got the kids, we've got their
Right.
network, but now looking at this other purpose of we want to drive our message of us being an innovative school to try and grab in these outside audiences.
It's
Well, how do we let our kids do
super
it for
challenging,
us?
right? And it's
You know?
and it's and the sustainability of it though too. So it's not like, wow, we had that amazing year where you were taking photographs and there was this other mom who was tech savvy and really into this and like totally did it, and then it just kind of, then it suffered for a few years after that because, you know, other people came in. It wasn't originally with a lot of this stuff, like they weren't the founding kind of members of doing it. They kind of tried to take over somebody else's thing, kind of sort of works, you know. So, I mean, those are the challenges. And it's like, so when you start to try to bring in the guardrails, you limit creativity. And at the same time, but then you create some more quality control over what we're doing and what we're not. So, I mean, that's the thing. I think it is a very hard discussion for sure.
Any other questions? Pip, Liz?
I wanted to echo Lisa's sentiment that I think this is really helpful to see, and I'm really glad that you're starting to look at all the look in detail at all the ways that we do communicate, and it's exciting to think about how that might come together and how we're going to be able to make some progress on this front. I just wanted to suggest, and maybe you said this already, but I missed it, that we maybe have a list of all of these channels, not every channel, but like specifically the accounts, somewhere where people can see them, because I think that there is a lot of information out there that a lot of people don't see unless they have a particular connection to the particular thing, then they don't get alerted to it.
Yep.
And I know you alluded to that a little bit from your past experience in doing that. And I think that, but just even having a list of those things would be great, because, you know, if I'm interested in a particular area of something, I might just, you know, connect to that thing. But I think so many people don't know about them unless they have a kid who's doing that particular thing. So it would be cool to put it on the website.
And I think
or
it's one of those things where if I want to put out I want to put out a list, and we do have a list, but it's not complete. Like, you know, it sounds like PHS Clippers wasn't on there. I just put out the principles, like, what do you know about that's in your realm? Give me it, and here are the things I want. I want what platform, what's the URL, you know, do you get to see it first? How often is it coming out? That type of thing.
How safe is it to link a button to our site?
Right. So even that, we're not even totally clear on all that stuff. Then the other challenges, which we got into, is I came in with, you know, and we started having this conversation about, well, look, here's the model that I used before, and talking about paying employees, giving them a stipend. Here's the expectation. We're going to monitor the work. And like, well, but there's a bunch of people who have been doing this for free for years. You know, you're going to pay one, and then we got to pay everybody else. And it's like, well, yeah, that's great. But if I don't pay anybody, then how do we have any expectation about, like, style, you know, any of those things we talked about that we would want to kind of have some control over? If it's just everything's freebieville, then it's hard to do that. So, but then as soon as you start we're going to pay for this, well, what's in for payment and what is not? And I think what we would move towards, probably in my head, it's like what I would push out as a district would be, there are going to be other things that people will reach out with to folks, but I would push the stuff that we are paying to have part of our communication, you know, and we have a theory behind what we're doing. We have expectations about when the stuff's going to come out, what it looks like, all that types of things, because then we have some thought process and quality control about what we're presenting to the world. And we say, these are our channels. These are the things we own as an institution. These are the things that we're presenting to you. There are these other things that are affiliated with us, but they are not, you know, they're not us. They're cousins. So I think I could see us moving to a model like that, because otherwise we could be chasing who should get paid and not get paid forever.
Thank you, Pip. Liz?
Just a couple comments, maybe some follow-ups about the new, what direction we're going in the future. But also, I guess I just want to dial it back to Parent Square. Is there a way to see, are there numbers of how many people are actually using it? I'd like to, I guess maybe for the next meeting, how many people are actually using it, and use the example of your post that had 250, I think it was, views for the video. How many people actually clicked that post? Are people reading the transcript there too? So it would be good to have if there's a way to do a breakdown for different schools and whatnot too. It'd be really good to have that information, because I don't know that I've seen any of that information since we've been using Parent Square, and obviously that's the newest platform that we've delved into and tried to get everybody using, and we haven't really gotten a whole lot of numbers, I don't think, from Parent Square. So
I think the communications committee did a pretty good job when they looked at Parent Square about what was available and not available in terms of data.
Okay.
But I'm happy to bring back with similar kind of like, here are the graphics, here's the things, here's the things you can get, so you can as a group kind of get a feel for here's what's available.
I guess not so much about what I can get of like who's using it right now. So if we're looking at a video that's getting 250 views, are we only getting 250 clicks, or are we getting 500 clicks? And but then people are because sometimes I read the transcript that you put on Parent Square versus watching the video.
Absolutely, and I get people to tell me exactly that. I get people to tell me all I look at is a transcript, because I don't have time to look at a video. And then I have other people like, I don't do the transcript, I just watch the video. And I'm also skeptical about 212, because it does go up. That's not significantly lower. That I would say it's anywhere from, I'm trying to remember, like 4 to 2 kind of range when I put those things out. But I run into people around town randomly all the time who are like, hey, you're the video guy. And so I don't know, like, I'm skeptical that it's only 200 people exclusively seeing it, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just 200 of the right people. And when I'm going to open houses when I was trying to find a house, those people are at the open house. And when I'm going to get coffee, there they are getting coffee. I will tell you that I'm a little skeptical on that the YouTube. I have to do some back digging on what does or does not register on the YouTube side, because I am curious to whether or not there are more people who are actually viewing some of that stuff than what I think. But.
Okay. And then I guess a couple just comments about the future. It sounds like, I guess I'm a little bit concerned, or I'd want to know more about the legalities, because it sounds like, and whether there needs to be more education to teachers about it or what's going on. Obviously Instagram accounts pop up, anybody can create one, but I would think if the school is sort of getting behind it and teachers are doing it, there are, I would assume, legalities, like you said, about people sign forms and they don't want their kid on the internet, and obviously teachers would I would assume know that sort of thing. But I guess it's like an account can pop up for sport teams, and then are we sort of liable if a kid's running that account for that account? And so like sharing those accounts and saying, here, these are all our accounts. So I guess I just wondered if you could come back to
so that's my like share out all the accounts thing. I'm like, ooh, if I'm saying here are all us, and some of them aren't us, and then we're putting out, and then we have a family who said we don't want our kids' images out there, and then one of those accounts who we don't control is putting that image out, then I worry about the same type of legalities.
Okay, and so is that a reason, I don't know, I guess another thing I'd want to revisit too is whether to do this in-house versus out-of-house. I know UNH Law has had their person in-house, and they were able to do different newscast type things, as well as a lot of the social, all of the social media. And so I think there's a benefit, but sometimes there could be a benefit to out-of-house, because obviously there's more minds and brains behind what they're able to do, and the analytics, and what they're able to sort of get behind.
So I would say that in the not too distant future, I think one of the things I think we need to think about. You guys have identified communication as an important thing, which is so true. And I'll tell you, a whole bunch of other districts have identified it just before COVID, and then in COVID, people really figured out, oh my God, we need to be able to be really quick, precise, clear about what it is we're saying. And the move in even some smaller districts has been to consider, how do you bring on capacity of some form of chief information officer. The city has recently hired a CIO, and I have had no conversation with the city about our ability to potentially utilize some of those services as a school district, and I'm sure when the city manager created that position, it was not with the intent of us absorbing some of that person's resources. But I do think, I know in my, former district, we were having conversations about if we needed to invest in an additional person, that there was real value in a consideration of a designated person that was going to be connected with information. Because what ends up happening instead is it ends up very often coming through in not a haphazard way, but it's coming through my office, and so I become your CIO in a lot of ways to the extent to which I can kind of manage it all. It's coming through me, and then trying to create systems for the whole thing to kind of work together, and all this kind of disparate group of people kind of work together. And so when there's a problem on the website early in the morning or something, I'm texting Patty to be like, hey, Patty, go switch the website. So
I mean,
if you're in a decent-sized corporation, you're not having your CEO and your assistant do your website. Go ahead, Liz.
No, I guess I'm just concerned too, because we just voted on the budget, and if this is something that we need, and we're having this amount of issues, and I mean, obviously with everything with, getting out messaging for, emergencies, and it just seems like, obviously we're sort of moving the budget forward. Maybe we can have this conversation later, but it seems like this needs to be sort of a line item or a proposal or something to come forward soon if we're having these type of issues.
I had some whispers over here saying strategic plan, and I think they're right.
Okay.
I think coming out of, strategic planning, depending on what we, as we go through that process, and I think it is as much as I think there's a trend towards places considering this something that's worthy now of hiring a position that's going to connect to it, it's also not everybody's doing it yet.
Can we afford to wait?
I think we can afford another cycle to go through, because we're still working we're still trying to figure out to do a deep analysis of what's actually happening, and I think that will then inform: is there a need, and is that need a full-time person, a half-time person? Is that need an executive level position? Is that need somebody that's in a different? There's all different types of tiers of people that you could bring on, and so I think I can see us the next cycle, me coming to you with a proposal that would include adding some additional human resources specifically for the purposes of information. But I don't know in terms of what amount of FTE that's going to be and what level of professional expertise and salary we'd be looking for in connection with that would be something I think that would come through the process we're going through right now.
Okay, I think it's time to move on. Thank you, everyone, for your comments, and Zach, that was a fascinating presentation, and I'm sure you'll keep us updated on it as time goes by. Okay, we will move on to the superintendent's report, part of our agenda, items of information. Zach, you're on again. Superintendent memo.
Just the memo's there. I'm happy to answer any questions connected with the memo. I think that's it.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone have a question on Zach's memo? Okay, go ahead, Kerry. I'm sorry.
I am on this agenda. I did not see the future agenda items. Would this be an appropriate time to ask for one?
Sure. What would you like us to?
It's a really
consider?
simple one. I just don't recall when it normally comes up, but the school calendar, camps are already filled.
Next.
And there's, and in some response to summer programs, they're deciding what they'll offer based on when our calendar comes out.
Okay.
So
It is definitely coming to you next meeting.
great.
No doubt about it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if you look at the school board email summary, we had one email regarding class sizes at Dondero Elementary School. And then, Lisa.
Sorry, I
No,
had a
that's
quick
okay.
question
I
on the
didn't-
memo.
Oh, yes.
when would we expect to know more about sort of the timeline for that process in terms of when things are going to roll out in strategic planning for the public? I know it's still in early days, but is there a
So we had a
for people on sort of, you've previewed it really well.
Yeah, so we had our initial meeting with Leah Tuckman, who's our point person for us. GSP met with all of the administrative team yesterday. So we went through. We had about an hour and a half meeting. Most of that was really focused on Portrait of a Graduate. Talking about the timeline, but really focused on it was introducing or reintroducing the principles. What is Portrait of a Graduate? Why are we doing Portrait of a Graduate? What are we hoping to get out of that process? We did talk a little bit about kind of working towards developing a team in the next week or two, next couple of weeks. And then the representative, Leah, would be here in front of the board on our next meeting to have a conversation with the board. And then in terms of the community, I was torn because I didn't want to, I wanted to provide the board with everything I was going to share with the community, but now I'm worried about March 14th. Like I want to go. I want to start talking to the community. And at the same time, I never want the board to ever be in a position where it feels surprised by something that the community's can't, I always feel like I want you to be, especially around key strategic initiatives like strategic planning. I want you to be in a position to kind of have an opportunity to see stuff. So I think what I'm anticipating is we will have some more work will be done in terms of some additional work with the administrative team and starting to recruit some folks to be on the working group, and then we'll have some conversation at the board on the 14th, and then I'm hoping to, I'll be like ready to burst to talk to the community about it right after the 14th. That's my thought process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Zach? Okay, let's move on to the district school report card. Does anyone have a question on that? Patty submitted a memo about that.
Nancy, I do.
Oh, yes, Carrie.
I was just curious on context. Was this something we were in compliance with? Could you just give me a little?
I'm glad you asked. Yes. So if you check the date of the memo, by February 3rd, we were required by the state of New Hampshire Department of Education to make sure that we had our link prominently displayed on our website, because that is a requirement of ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. That link is now there. I provided a screenshot under district information. It's highlighted for you to look at. And that link goes to iReport, which is something that the state has developed, has had, I think, since 2018, pretty much displaying school data, not only just student test scores, but there's a lot of demographic information, and you can do a lot of mining of information. On the second page, sort of a couple little snapshots of the page that when you land on iReport, what you can look at, and you can either look school by school, district as a whole, and then there are a lot of different areas that you can peruse through that. Pretty much self-explanatory, but a lot of information that's in there, but that link is now up for folks to find quite easily.
So is this new?
This is a new requirement of the state, but the website has existed previous to that, but they wanted it to be very easy for people to find information about local school and district. They call it the report card. Pretty much gives the public an understanding of how students are performing and what the demographics are in the district.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you, Patty. Let's move on to the financial memo and report. Zach put together a financial memo for us, and then Nathan has some pages here. Are there any comments that either you want to take it, Nathan? Okay.
Yeah, seems like we've been doing well with the memo. Trying to describe, I would say that the biggest question has been the salaries continuing to lag behind. Andrew and I have wrapped up the analysis and the calculations today, and so he'll be working over the next week to key all that in, the impact of salaries and taxes and retirement. So at least for the collective bargaining agreements that are now resolved, you'll see those impact in in the financial report for February, when we meet again next month. Otherwise, there was no new news.
Any questions for Nathan? No? Okay, let's move on to consideration and approval of the leave of absence. Do we have a motion to accept the leave of absence?
So moved.
Second, okay. Brian and Kerry, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Consideration and approval of non-supervisory cafeteria personnel agreement. Do we have a motion to accept this agreement?
So moved.
Margot, second. Pip? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. And the third one we have is I guess we have more than that. Consideration and approval of para-educational memorandum of understanding.
Move to approve.
Ann, second.
Second.
Brian, any questions, discussion? Yes, Kerry.
So this was the one that we had already moved forward,
Yes.
and then this is the text for it. Can the minutes just clearly, I would just want the minutes to reflect that this document replaces the motion from the prior meeting.
So I guess let me clarify, go one step
Yes.
further. Not only does this replace, but ultimately through the conversation that happened at City Council on the 13th of
January.
January.
Did I get that date right? Was it 23rd? Was it 13th? 23rd? Anyway, when City Council considered this, in the conversation that night, the effective date became verbally January 1st, as opposed to upon ratification or upon approval. So the document in front of you not only clarifies, but it adjusts now the effective date to 1 January as opposed to when it's voted. So you're serving two masters here. You're getting two things accomplished. Just to be clear what you're voting on.
Is that clear, Kerry? Because you had a concern about that the last time, so is that clear?
I think in the meeting minutes, it's just, sorry, I don't have the right ones up. So, yeah, just to reference that it was the January 24th, 2003, 2023 meeting, and that just replaces that.
Okay. Okay, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next we have the consideration and approval to establish an ad hoc committee for superintendent evaluation process. Did we get that? Okay, does everybody have, yeah, Margot, why don't you take that?
This, the proposal form, I'm not sure why it's crooked, but apologies for that. That came off of our conversation that we were having way back in the fall when we talked about committees. And so, as we know, it's in the contract, and we need to have a formal evaluation of our superintendent every year. We waited some time since it's a new relationship, and it's time to form a committee to go through the evaluation process, agree on what the evaluation should be, who should be involved, et cetera. So this is the new form that we're using, modeling it. Hope you all like it for when new committees are proposed. As it says, it would be ad hoc. So really the duration would be now through June. The proposal is 2 to 3 board members, and likely a member from legal would be part of that. I just said that the intended purpose of this committee is to develop the formal end-of-the-year superintendent evaluation and the process to be followed for carrying out this evaluation. The first meeting will include watching the New Hampshire School Boards Association webinar on the superintendent evaluation process. A draft evaluation will be developed and shared with the superintendent and board for approval. A timeline of the evaluation process will be developed and shared with the superintendent and board for approval. A list of evaluators will be generated for approval by the superintendent and board, and the committee will end at the conclusion of the process. I also included under there the reference to the law under RSA 91-A:5. This committee will assume that employee evaluations are exempt from public disclosure, which is how we've operated in the past.
Yes, Carrie?
Just curious about the thought on this being an ad hoc versus a standing committee. I guess my one concern with that would be that it would be reappointed every year, and could be really changed or swayed depending on that, and that the process would be relearned. So it seems like having some continuing membership could be important so that you don't have 3 new people every year.
All I can say is in the past, once the evaluation and the process was agreed upon by the board, any adjustments would go through the board, not through committee. But that doesn't mean we have to do it that way. Meaning the evaluation once, it's the same evaluation every year. If the board decides to alter a section of it, then that goes to the board, not to a section of the board to make that proposal. And the timeline, once decided, other than the dates following a different time of year, but the timeline of, 2 weeks, blah, 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 that stays consistent.
Do you mind if I just follow up?
Go ahead.
Sorry. So thinking about this, the contract committees, those are standing, correct? Even though those only meet for a short period of time, but they are not disbanded. So I guess to me, it makes sense to have this be similar to that, where it is a standing committee. But in general, I think this is a great process. But that way, it is also consistently sort of assigned by the board, and not something that every year we're picking up and like scrambling for or forgetting or whatnot.
Thank you, Carrie. Brian?
Just maybe some clarification in my mind, because when I read this as develop a process, and then we have a process, and then we'll use it every year. That would be like the purpose of the ad hoc committee, right?
Yep.
But it's called Superintendent Evaluation Committee, so maybe there was some confusion in that it's the committee actually evaluating.
Oh, no.
Right? So I just want to make sure that it was just really for the process,
Yep.
not for the actual evaluation. Does that make sense?
So who, and then in general,
Oh, yes.
in general, then the process will be defined by this group, and the chair leads this process every year,
Yeah.
or
we'll all
however
participate.
it's designed.
Yeah,
designed.
however it's designed. But
So could we change the name to Student Evaluation Process Committee?
or
Or evaluation development committee?
What would you suggest, Brian?
something that explains what it is, I guess.
Ad
really
hoc
matter.
committee
Doesn't
to
matter.
develop evaluation process is kind of
Process,
what you're.
anything with process in it.
I mean, but
Liz?
isn't at the end of the day though, every year somebody's going to have to deal with compiling and going through the process and making sure everybody's aware of the process and doing all this sort of stuff. So I guess to Carrie's point, I think it would make sense to have some sort of committee that's developing the process, tweaks the process, whatever, deals with it every year, and have it. And but like the committee doesn't have to meet every other week. It could be once a quarter, but at least the meeting's on the schedule, and we're not going to lose that process. And whoever's going to pick up the the strings to pull it all together.
Thank you, Liz. Lisa?
I think my one question with this is to have some sense of the timing of the meetings, because we have had some issues this year in particular with people being unable to attend the committees that they're assigned to. And I would think particularly for this, that it would be essential that whoever's serving can attend and participate. So I think it would be helpful to have some sense of, when is it starting? Is it going to be another committee that's going to meet in the middle of the school day because we have to do it that way? Or I don't know. I mean, I don't want to dictate every last detail, but to know that the people who are on it are going
to be able to
be part of it.
Okay. Go ahead, Margot.
I just want to clarify, I know because of COVID and everything, this process has been lost, but it is owned by the board. So it is always, once the process and the evaluation is clarified, the board as a whole is responsible for carrying it out. It doesn't require tweaks. If the board changes its goals, depending on how the evaluation is written, if there's a section on delivery to goals. It's just the language of what the goals are that would change, but the section and the evaluation wouldn't change. So I guess I want to be careful that we're not sending this message that this group would need to meet monthly to continue to have eyes on an evaluation that happens once a year that's owned by the board as a whole. So to Brian's point, I would suggest the name be changed to Ad Hoc Superintendent Evaluation Development Committee, or Evaluation Process Development Committee, to be clear the purpose it serves, because the ownership of the evaluation is owned by the board. Every year, it's carried out by the board, it's carried out by the board chair and the vice chair. That's never changed over the time. So, but it's just that we haven't, because of COVID, there's been a pause in the normal cadence of the process.
So is the 2 to 3 times a month then a correct frequency?
It's, yeah, again, because it's ad hoc, as I said, it's literally February till June. So the 2 to 3 times a month is because the board meetings are twice and you need approval through board and superintendent for various things. That will it necessarily utilize all that? No, maximum it'd be that, but takes a little, and then has to go through legal. So it's a short term. If it gets approved tonight, it's literally mid-February to mid-June.
Carrie?
This may be, so, and I hear all of these things and I don't disagree with any of them, but I'm just also thinking of having, with it on the note of standing committee, and thinking about the other issues that we've had related to communication of goals, approval of goals, like making sure that, like, I guess I would see benefit in making this a standing committee to ensure that the elements needed for evaluation are also sort of spearheaded or brought forward, or, you know, T's are crossed and I's are dotted by this small group.
Brian?
I'd be in full support of this, but I would hope the very first thing would be, because June's coming right up, and then you have to execute that plan, that we have some sort, like the very first thing is a timeline of when the process would be completed.
Pip?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt this committee as presented with the change of the name
To?
To Superintendent Evaluation Development Committee.
Okay. Is that all you want to put in that motion? We can vote on that motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. The motion is we're going to change the name to Superintendent Evaluation Development Committee. Pip made the motion and seconded it. Any comments, any dialogue? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Did you want to talk about it being a standing committee?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I mean, first of all, I think, Zach, I'd love your thoughts. I don't want to over-committee us with, you know, I guess it's more just reflective on some of the things that could be improved and may be.
You know, I've seen over the years boards really struggle with this. This is a really hard thing for all boards, and you know, I think the recommendation to make sure there's the tether to the School Boards Association as a resource, I think is really smart, because it's twofold. I mean, you know, a key component of this is, just like we try to do with employees, you know, giving regular feedback about how the job is going and what we need or what's going great and what isn't going so well, super important. And then also, you know, you think about your, you know, the most important roles that you play. You know, we've talked about this, right? What are the jobs of the board? Hire and fire superintendent, budget and policy. That's really the core of your job. So I think taking the time to devote a group of people to do a deep dive, to be very thoughtful about what does that process look like, to be able to really to define that process really well, both for the whole board, and for me and for the public. I think it's just a really good, smart move. And, so I think but I think the key to it all, in it being successful and not having, is doing the deep dive, doing the thoughtful work, and then making sure everyone here understands it well as you move into that process. So.
Yeah, Nate,
Do you want to summarize all of this for us, or?
I have a resolution, I think,
Okay.
to the conversation. Can I just ask that in the committee description, we add in, and recommendations on, time for reevaluation or establishment of a standing committee? I'll write it.
I think if you remember with the committee process, at the end of a committee, the board can decide one of two things: to vote to disband an ad hoc, or to vote to roll it into a standing. So be careful, because this committee right now, as Zach said, is doing a deep dive into this process, this evaluation. Once that grows some legs and that's carried out, then we're in a position to say, how can we do this well going forward? And that might be the proposal of a standing committee that would have a different purpose than what's in print here. But that would come in right at the end of this, where we're at that position of a board to propose a standing committee or to disband this ad hoc, or both.
So it doesn't need, what I'm hearing, it doesn't need to be added explicitly to a description, because it is the natural
Next step.
order of the board function.
And the timing of it's really good too, because then you roll into the summer, and then you've got like kind of like, here's this like wrap up of the year. Here are the things that we feel like went well, didn't went well from here, which is reflective of what people feel like is going on overall, and it leads in a natural flow of conversation in kind of summer retreat with the board about what are we all collectively doing. Okay, great. Here's what we learned over the course of this year, and what's it going to be like next year. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And then that is a great time to talk about that longer term. Is there a need for an ongoing committee? Retreat's a great time for that too.
Okay, so, we need a motion. We have the first and the second.
passed.
Okay, okay, so we're
But
all
if
set.
People that are interested should email Nancy and myself, and we'd like to get that going ASAP.
soon as possible,
Got a lot of work
right.
to do.
Okay. Okay, Margot, thank you. Margot put a lot of work into that. Okay, the next item on the agenda is consideration and approval to establish performance objectives that the superintendent will report quarterly per his contract. The superintendent will report on 2 performance objectives: strategic planning and communications. The superintendent will report to the board at the 3/28/23 and 6/13/23 meetings. Do we have a motion to consider, to approve this consideration?
So moved.
Brian, second?
Sure.
Carrie? Okay, do we have discussion?
Yes.
Margot?
I'm trying to figure out how to word it. I'm concerned that the way it's written, it would be hard for us to get a presentation on, I think what we're looking for performance is progress to date. So, we've evaluated and hire a firm, we've had progress to date, et cetera, but under communication, those are I think the aspects that we placed under that for our board goal was on what are we all agreeing is necessary for quality communication going forward, but that would be very difficult to ask someone to present on. I don't know how you'd present on performance for those, so I feel like we need to be way more black and white and clear on the actual performance objectives related to those key tenets of communication. I don't know if I said that clearly, but.
So how would you reword it?
Yeah, I need to spend a minute. See if there's other questions, maybe. Okay.
Margot?
Yes, Lisa and then Carrie.
Carrie had her hand up, I can wait.
Okay, Carrie, then Lisa.
to Margot, to follow up on Margot's, I think we'll report progress or something to that effect, but I think my concern, which I know is a minority on the board, is that to me, there is a lot of, the communication goal is to create an effective partnership, blah, 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 and that the school board will approve a plan that focuses on communication. And then it has the tenets of those communication. And then there's, in my opinion, been a lot of different opinions on what this means, when it's supposed to be done, things like that. I envision this as like the full year, but I think there just needs to be a clear understanding of the board of where that communication comes from. And I think that that would be the chair of the board is, there has to be a subjective component from someone that is like, this is sufficient or not sufficient. It can't be all 9 of us. Does that make any sense? So I think the report progress to the board may kind of modify or may help to clarify that first part. And then as the second part, all we're saying here as a goal is that by the end of the year, in my mind, we will approve a plan. And I think someone needs either, as Margot said, the specifics need to be put into what we see as these tenets, what we want as deliverables, or we need to have a point person, board chair, and, I'm sorry, assistant deputy, Margot?
Vice
Margot,
chair.
Vice, thank you.
Thank you for that title.
That we either need to do, and so that's why I would recommend, just because of all the back and forth and the time and the confusion on this, that we just make that clear, if that we're adopting this goal, the adequacy of meeting this goal needs to be from the board chair and vice chair.
Okay. Let's see what others have to say. Ann, and then Lisa.
I would think that we really should have consensus of the board. Not
just the chair and the vice
And
chair.
generally, you read the consensus really well. You know what's happening, so I feel that's important.
Sorry, Lisa.
That's okay.
You're next. Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, I think that this is one area where we can say in 2020 hindsight that when we had our retreat in August, we did a better job with the strategic plan of laying out some specific objectives than we did with the communications goal. I feel like we did have a meeting where we agreed that our superintendent would come back with a draft communications plan for the board to review, and part of what was embedded in that plan was for him to identify what are his big things that he wants to work on most urgently over the near term. And I think it would be reasonable to put in here that the goal for communications, since we are where we are and it's almost June, is to produce that plan for the board. And within that plan, if we're getting it and there's any near-term things that are achievable by June, to lay those out. I mean, I don't know at this point how we rewind to go back in time and get the specifics. I mean, I agree with you, Carrie, it would have been very beneficial to have them, but I don't think that we can sort of wave the magic wand and say, oh, these were in retrospect the goals that we should have come up with back in time, if that makes sense. You know, I mean, like what Zach laid out tonight around social media, there's a lot of work right there, which is in progress, and there could be some concrete goals around that, just as an example, that maybe are achievable by June that are reasonable to bake in. But I guess I don't want to presuppose what those benchmarks are by fiat. But I feel like, would it be a fair compromise to say that one goal is just to deliver the communications plan, and then to identify within that plan some achievable benchmarks to hit by June in the areas that Zach identified? I'm not going to say them right now, but there were 3 that you identified at the last meeting that were your big objectives. I think one was around social media and Parent Square, and I'm blanking now on the other 2. But
Thank you, Lisa. I think Margot has a suggestion.
Okay, so maybe on that, what we're saying is, and this isn't as detailed, but like we have the 3 under strategic plan, evaluate and hire a firm, easy to present out on that, establish strategic plan, establish an annual operating plan, right? Easy to present out where we are to date on those. I wonder if the 3 for communication would be established plan or produced plan, whatever language we want. Second, update progress to timeline on major goals. And 3, report on next steps. I don't know if that's within reason or, but I do understand that benchmarks is one of those. But I'm thinking in terms of this comes off of the Zach's contract, which says quarterly performance. And so the theory behind that was quarterly reports on what are you doing to advance board goals. So where we've run into the muck is, okay, so what do we need to hear that gives us all clearness on how it's advancing? So that would be the 3 that I would propose that don't get into, we're not going down into the fine print, but they clearly identify the 3 components of that goal in a way that can be quarterly reported.
I think that makes sense, Margot, and I think when we have the strategic planning goal, that last sentence before we list the objectives, we say, this is the time to develop a strategic plan that can be implemented for the next school year. And I feel like carrying that language down to communications to say this would be a good time to develop a communications plan that can be implemented for the 23-24 school year could be a nice way of framing that, if people agree. And then, like the strategic plan, step 1 is draft the plan. Step 2 is, what are the steps that we're going to do now, and then what needs to come next, or something like that. So kind of what you said, but just tee it up the same way we teed up the strategic plan goal, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Let's hear Pip and then Liz.
I just wanted to say that I like that idea. I think that makes a lot of sense, just even in terms of the structure of how we're presenting these goals. Because I think we've learned that the clearer we can get, the better we're all going to be in terms of understanding it the same way. But I also wanted to say that I think I agree with you that identifying those sort of like 3 top priorities is really important. And I wonder if I'm assuming that will happen naturally in a communications plan. But so we could either just assume that will take place within that will come to us inside the communications plan, or we could identify that the communications plan should identify what those top 3 priorities are. And that's a way to make sure we're doing both.
Thank you, Pip. Liz?
I would propose that we don't get into all the specifics and keep the strategic plan stuff to a separate sort of discussion around strategic planning, and keep the quarterly performance objectives general, strategic planning and communication. So when we have the performance committee that comes in and takes a look, we can say, all right, well, how are we doing with the strategic planning in general, and the process that was created with the strategic planning committee and the development versus trying to define everything right now into specifics. Obviously I wasn't expecting Zach to give the presentation he gave about communication tonight. Great. I don't think we can even, would have contemplated, specifics about, Parent Square, so to speak. So I would suggest, if we're going to do performance objectives, keeping them general as we're sort of getting into this process and reinventing this process or restarting this process, and let the committee get into the feedback and develop the specifics, as we do the strategic planning process separately and take votes there. And as we get information about communication that we might want to vote on and do stuff. So I would keep it general, those 2 things. I'm a little bit hesitant to sit here and work out specifics today. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Lisa?
So I was just going back through my notes from the January 24th board meeting, when we did give Zach an opportunity to identify his 3 big areas that he wanted to work on communications. And he identified 3 things. He said creating consistent messages across schools and across the district to improve credibility, accuracy, timing, and reliability of communications. website improvements to make it a more effective default resource for information, and working to improve Parent Square and social media. And those were also the three sort of areas that we included in the template that we created for Zach as we were asking him to consider, the elements that he might want to include in the communications plan. And we're also drawn from the original draft communications plan that Zach had done himself. So I guess I'm not sure that we need new goals again. I mean, those were identified, and the motion around creating the communications plan template laid out those three things that Zach identified as the three things that would go in that template. So I think those still give him a lot of room to identify what work he would want to do around those areas, or what ways to demonstrate progress in those areas, and what's reasonable to do in a fair timeline. But I feel like we have the things. I mean, and they didn't come from the board. I mean, they came from his expertise around what he's been seeing in the district so far as he's been wrapping his arms around all the different things that are happening. And I apologize, Zach, if I worded it in not the right way, but those were the broad ways that I,
I think those are,
took
I
the
think those are
notes.
fair. Yep.
Did you get all that, or?
Yeah,
I got-
it just sounds like, is the question on the table that the three things we're gonna put under these performance objectives are those key priorities Zach established, or the three things we're gonna put under these performance objectives related to communication is broad stroke of establish the plan, provide information related to progress, share next steps. I think those are the two different things I've heard.
I think what you're saying is in line with this. I just meant to speak to Liz's point that we already have identified the three main areas. So this isn't an issue where the board needs to sort of rehash, in my opinion,
I hear
what
you now.
that
I
would be.
misunderstood
So
you.
I think it would be reasonable to say, yeah, number one, produce the communications plan. Number two, report on progress on those three main areas that Jack already identified as his main goals. And then three, report on next steps. If that's,
So you would add your three elements under,
In lieu of the four that are here,
Right.
which are our goal. This is our goals. We're talking about performance objectives.
so the performance object.
I would make, here,
All
I'll
right,
do it as I say.
why don't?
I would make a
all right,
motion.
let's listen to this motion,
Oh my
everybody.
God, I'm gonna have to try to write
And
this
Nancy,
down.
that's also consistent with the draft communications plan template that you reviewed and Margot reviewed,
Right.
and that Zach has been discussing with the admin team
Yes.
around the district.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I would make the motion that I would replace 1 through 4 under communication as it pertains to quarterly performance objectives with 1, establish or draft, whatever word we want, a communication plan that identifies top priorities for the district in the coming school year. 2, provide information related to progress. 3, report on next steps.
And that would be an amendment to the existing motion.
Well, there is an emotion on.
Yeah,
oh,
there is. Yep,
There is.
motion
I'm
second.
Okay.
You're amending,
Yep,
you're amending that
thank
motion,
you.
right?
Okay, I'm going to write that down.
Who is this, who was the first?
Brian moved and Carrie seconded essentially what's in the agenda as a motion.
Do you accept that amendment?
Yes.
Carrie, do you accept that amendment? Okay. The first and the second accept the amendment. Now we'll have discussion on that amendment. Carrie?
Margot, I think that, I appreciate that. I think that helps to clarify and at least move us forward for this year. And I just have to say, I think that this process has been a learning thing for all of us, that we have a lot of lessons to take back from. But I just think that the level of, the amount of time we've spent on it, as a board is inappropriate and has bordered on micromanagement. And I just, it's up to us as a board to make those goals explicitly clear in the summer, and we can move and learn and go forward from that. But it highlights things like when we make a goal around, we want a communications plan, that does mean 4 different things to 4 different people. So I think I just want to highlight it, and I appreciate you addressing my concern with the amendment, and then that we do better going forward.
Thank you. Brian?
May I ask her a question?
Yep, you can ask her a question.
What feels micromanaging about this?
So I think, to me, in this goal, this is a year-long goal that we established in the summer, to create an effective partnership, blah, 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 so we'll make a plan. But then to, on multiple meetings, kind of criticize the way that this is happening or not happening, and it just it has felt, to me as an observer and not someone who's intimately involved with this process, as throwing up hurdle after hurdle in a public meeting. And I think that it just, to me, could have been managed better. I think one of the biggest things that comes up for me is that whether the communication plan is a strategic plan of goals moving forward, or a plan that has all of how the district will communicate. And those are two very different things and used interchangeably in our discussion. So that's just mine.
Thank you, Carrie. Interesting perspective. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we want to take a vote on this. Liz, you're the
Yeah,
last
just
one.
briefly, I guess that's why it goes to my point of generality. So if we're creating objectives for Zach to come back with, I think Zach's been the creative one that said, these are things that I think that would be good as far as measurable components of me doing a communication plan. But he sort of presented that himself. I do think that he is capable of doing that. And so I think that that's why we should just say strategic plan, develop it, have this process, and have it there, not all these specifics, and then communication, and that we want to buffer our communication and make it better, leave it general, and then you use the committee to evaluate, where has Zach at? Where is he going? And then, if we may want to change our goals next year or whatever, every quarter, we want to update them, then maybe we sort of get into, more of a specific or an ask or whatnot. But I think right now, that's why I would suggest even amending this to eliminate getting into specifics and just keep it general, strategic plan and communication, because I feel like that's what we landed on when we had our retreat. We never really got into the specifics. That's what we landed on, and we walked away from it. And I think we just need to go back to that and keep it general, so that the interpretations aren't different for everybody and everybody's getting what they want or whatever, because at the end of the day, Zach's going to come back and show us what he's done. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Lisa, did you want to say something before we vote?
Nah.
Okay. First, we have to vote on the amendment, correct, Nathan?
Margot, and so I would love to have a second to Margot's.
We do. We had Brian and Kerry.
Okay.
We agreed to the amendment.
They agreed to
Accepted
the
a friendly amendment?
I haven't ever seen you guys do friendly amendments, but that
Well, I don't
felt like
think we've ever done it before.
So,
but I-
so play it like you, if you want to.
Unfriendly.
Yes.
Get a second, is what you're looking for?
Yeah, why don't we?
get a
I'll
second.
second, do,
So Carrie-
or Margot,
Margot made an amendment.
Would you like me to reread the amendment?
Yeah, yes. Why
Did you
don't
see the language
No.
I sent you?
guys all
No, we
got
don't
it.
have to.
good.
Okay.
good.
Carrie's,
Okay, first we have to vote on the amendment, then we have to vote on the original motion.
right, so you're just
Okay.
adding the language that Margot read
Yes.
to what was
the
already in
original
the
motion.
agenda.
Yes. Okay.
Go ahead,
All in
vote on it.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. That's the amendment. Now we have to vote on the entire motion here that includes the strategic planning
Moved
part
by
of it.
Brian and seconded by Carrie
Yes.
originally.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Wow. Great board. We had two big votes tonight, and we accomplished everything, and it's only 10 after 9.
Thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Nathan, for a little.
I just,
Thank you,
trying to
Nathan, for the parliamentarian work.
I'm trying to protect him from getting beat up by the minute taker tomorrow.
I know,
I know.
I think Paulette needs to
them all
appreciate what
down.
you just
So
said.
no, Paulette should definitely appreciate
She will
Nathan's
appreciate this,
actions,
yes.
yes.
And thank you to Margot for
Yes.
crafting that for
Yep.
us. Okay. Okay, I think we are on committee updates, and let's go to Lisa first with her legislative committee.
Okay. So the committee is moving forward slowly and carefully to try to cull the many hundreds of bills on education down to a much more manageable list of maybe 15 to 20-ish that we hope to come back to the board with in March with some suggested positions that the board may wish to consider taking. Several board members have reached out to me to suggest some bills be added to our list for consideration that weren't on the original list. there's so many, it's really easy to miss something that may be important to the district, and I would encourage people to continue to reach out. Anyone in the public can always just use the school board contact form online to send any feedback that they may have at this point. I would say that broadly, we're trying to weigh, as we look at bills, which ones may have the biggest impact for the entire district and not get bogged down too much in something that might only affect a very small population. Zach has very kindly agreed to, drag Nathan in a little bit where there may be fiscal implications to make sure that something that we recommend to the board doesn't have an unintended financial consequence. So as an example, there's several bills around school lunch that sound great on the surface because they would prevent stigmatizing students who don't pay their lunch bills. But we want to think carefully about which of all of those bills may be the best ones for us to weigh in on that have the correct and intended effect. So that's just one example. We are most likely going to be in a position after bills leave the House of Origin to cross over to the other house of the legislature to start to tee up the board potentially to hopefully do some written testimony or some oral testimony, maybe on a very, very small slice of these bills that we're watching. And the intention with that is to pick some things where we have broad consensus and where we can just test out this process. Because this is an ad hoc committee, and the real goal of the committee for this year is to come back to the retreat in August and be able to make some decisions about, is this serving us well? If we want to keep it going, how should we restructure it so that it works more efficiently and wraps in more people? Nancy and I just attended a really great discussion on Zoom today with several other school boards around the state that are also in kind of the same spot we are. They looked at the fire hose of legislation flying through in the last couple of years and went, geez, we have no idea how to really start to think about how we might weigh in. So we got some great feedback from how Manchester is doing it, how Keene is doing it. It sounds like Oyster River and maybe Hampton or Hampton Falls also is working on it, but they weren't able to join the conversation today. So we're working as closely as we can with NHSBA to really get their guidance on what are the best ways to build consensus, what are the best ways to pick the things that really have legs. And I think there's going to be a more realistic update for people next month. I think the list I have right now is still about 50 bills long, which is far more bills than we can practically ask the board to weigh in on or read. But certainly if you have a chance to skim the list and there's any that you feel strongly we should not be weighing in on or any that you really want us to look at carefully, reach out. And if there's any that you feel like need to be added to the list, we still have an opportunity to do that. I think my hope is for the packet for the first, or maybe it'll either be March or it will definitely be by April. If it's not in March, we'll have in the packet a written list with the links of the bills for anything that we're going to recommend positions around so that people will have a chance to review it. And I guess, that's the update at this stage. I will say I have whole new respect for NHSBA. Like just doing this sliver of work is pretty labor intensive and they do a lot more.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? Okay, do we have any other committee updates? Has anybody been to a committee meeting? Yes, Nick.
So on the student council end, first off, the winter semi-formal finally wound up happening. I'm hearing very good things from just about everyone I've asked. So my understanding is that the homecoming dance, we had a few issues just around like the music, and then I think just a few misunderstandings with the administration that kind of resulted in like just a less ideal dance, I suppose. But with the winter semi-formal, we made a point as a student council of working a lot more closely with the administration. Like we brought in the music list much farther in advance, and I think the results were very positive. So certainly much better than what happened previously. And so that was a success. And then also we have our second Senate meeting of the year, during which I will be reporting on school things and actually also looking for who's going to replace me. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you all posted.
Nick, we're going to miss you.
Yeah. I'm going to miss this too, actually. Yeah.
Thank you for being with us these years.
And then the last thing I wanted to highlight was that the Model UN this year was actually able to go to the Boston Model UN Bosman trip, which was something that we actually, you might remember last year was a major reason why we were proposing the club fund. Because that was just a major fundraising hurdle last year. In part because we had access to the club fund, the Model UN felt like it was much more able to fundraise with Bosman in mind and was actually able to go and also cover everybody who needed financial aid in doing so. So it was a really great time. I was lucky enough to go. So yeah, I'm very happy with that. And I just wanted to say that the club fund and the legislation on that front is actually making a real difference.
Oh,
That's great. That's really
Thank you.
great. Thank you, Nick.
Any other updates, Danielle? Would you like to tell us how things are at Lister Academy?
Things are going well. The Maple program is well underway. Our students have gone over to each of the elementary schools, I think at this point, several times to do their tutoring type education for the little ones, and I know that's a big hit. And the quality of education that really happens, the teaching that happens, and the kids hands-on and engaged and really using academic vocabulary at a high level for third graders is, I know, something that our Maple teacher is super proud of. Actually, they're co-teaching, so we have two of our teachers who go over. And our kids are really ramping up. We're excited. We found out that our craft fair aligns perfectly with the high school craft fair, and so we'll be sharing, hopefully, people visiting both of those. And our kids are undertaking some really big and exciting but various different projects that they're envisioning and laying out. And so it's lots of good hands-on stuff for this time of year, which is well needed as we go through these gray, cold
Winter.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was at the McLaughlin household. There was a third grader who wanted to talk a lot about the maple syrup people. He's very excited about the whole maple syrup presentation and everything that happened. And so it was good. Big thumbs up.
Will give kudos to those two teachers because I think having been able to repeat the program for a couple years now and really increase the rigor that we are teaching to those third graders. Like our kids, we have very few who have repeated it, but because there is a repetition in the school, it gets built up. And so our kids are proud and excited and actually competing to get into it. Which is nice because we know we have some seniors and some older classmen who just really want to get into it before they get out, or they're planning ahead to their next year where they're going up to the high school. We've had lots of middle schoolers coming to visit, but also our kids going over to the CTE program and to the high school, really looking at those partnerships. And I think, I know our project of getting into our new space is still in limbo, but I think we're really excited to envision what that could be and what that'll look like as we move forward. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Thank you, everyone.